This program is brought to you by the Cake Palace. Freshly oven-baked cakes every time you order. Franchisees available.
Welcome back to 5 News Australia. This is Sofiana Rose here, and today I'll be introducing you to our one former senator from the Greens Party, Mrs. Lee Rhiannon, who will be speaking to us about her journey towards her support and compassion towards the Pakistani community for Kashmir. So, Mrs. Rhiannon, what I have for you is that you've been just recently awarded by the Pakistani government for the Quaid Azam Award. So please speak to us about your emotions and feelings about this.
Oh, look, it was a great honour to get the award, and to be quite honest, I was also surprised. It was not something that I had expected. I had the opportunity to go to Azad, Kashmir in 2018, and it was a huge eye-opener for me. And one of the things that really brought home to me, like I'm nearly 70, I've been involved seriously in politics since I was 15, and in a lot of international work around against the Vietnam War, to end apartheid in South Africa, for the support for the East Timorese and Latin American issues. And then I started to think, well, why hasn't the world spoken about Kashmir? And I realised that what so many people have accepted, including on the progressive side of politics where I work, is that it's this issue just between Pakistan and India and leave it up to them. And that's a very dangerous approach, and it's very much the narrative that India puts out there, and our government, the Conservatives as well as Labor, have accepted, as have many European countries. And that's deeply wrong. Like, I'm not here to fly the flag for Pakistan, but what I've certainly realised, and you see it very clearly, and there's even some news that's broken just now, that the approach from the Pakistani government to the situation in Kashmir is quite different from how the Indian government, like on August the 5th, just over a year ago, the Indian government effectively took over India, ending self-rule, changed the constitution, people have died, put in more troops, a communications blockade, like just a horrendous. And that's had so little publicity here, so that's really ruthless. When you hear the Pakistani president speak, Pakistani Prime Minister, speak, Mr. Imran Khan, he speaks about the need for a diplomatic solution.
Definitely.
And also when it was at the end of 2018, the United Nations Human Rights Commission came forward with a very important report about the situation in Kashmir and put forward a number of recommendations, including having a commission of inquiry to go there, to Pakistan, to India, and to speak with the Kashmiris about the situation. India immediately ridiculed that and wouldn't accept any of the recommendations, whereas Pakistan said that they would, and they would cooperate with the Commission of Inquiry. So there's so many examples that I think people like myself should take notice of, that this is an issue of global concern. And why I also say that is it's because it's the most densely militarised region in the world. Which is really alarming, because let's remember, and I think we often forget it when you live on the East Coast, as we do, that the West Coast is, its borders the Indian Ocean. India's a neighbour. You know, the subcontinent, Pakistan, these are all countries that are our neighbours, and here it's highly militarised, and you have 3 nuclear powers, and it's this hotbed. So my big motivation is to work with Kashmiris for their self-determination. People have a right to decide their own future. That's been denied to Kashmiris. That's why I've spoken out. I had the opportunity to speak to many people when I was able to visit Azad Kashmir. I was fortunate to go to a conference about this issue at the House of Commons in England, and met many Australians who work on this issue. And we need more voices supporting the right of Kashmiris to self-determination.
Exactly. Like, you know, if we're speaking for yourself as well, there's just a lack of knowledge that in society we have today about what's happening at the other side of the world. We're just so dwelled up upon our own thoughts, and it's just shocking how, you know, when we hear these things and see these things, we just don't know how to react. And that's bad. You know, we've been taught from generations and generations to not talk about politics and religion because it's considered as a taboo. But why? We can always have these civil conversations in a civil matter. And especially with the Kashmir Act, which is going on right now, how do you feel about like the whole controversy with India and Pakistan disputing about Kashmir itself. Do you feel that Kashmir should be an independent state?
Well, I don't say if it should be an independent state or it should be part of partly India, partly Pakistan. To my mind, that's why it's up to the Kashmiris.
Yeah.
And let's remember that's what the United Nations passed resolutions that were never sadly put into effect.
Yeah.
So that whole notion of self-determination, that conversation needs to be lifted up. I see the role of people like myself, and it's good to meet yourselves, and I've got to know other people in the community, is to have these conversations, but particularly talk about the rights of Kashmiris, wherever they may live. I think there's a lot to be learned from the Palestinian situation, and one of the things that worries me is how the Modi government in India is copying a lot of the tactics that the Netanyahu government has used against the Palestinians.
Yeah.
The way they're moving settlers in, and now with this new domicile law where they've actually passed a law that allows non-Kashmiris to buy land, to buy houses. What that results in is that you change the demographic. Then you end up with a population that'll say, oh yeah, this is really good, we want Indian troops here, or whatever else that they, bad things that they might say. That just annihilates the rights of Kashmiris. So there's so many issues that we need to take up, and I think raising awareness is a key place to start.
Yes, I definitely do agree with you, Mrs. Rhiannon. Do you think that it's religion which plays a vital role in this?
Well, look, it's often presented as religion, and when you look at what's happening in India, I can understand why people say that, and we need to, and I think this is a huge part of the problem, the tactics of the BJP party, that where they're promoting extreme Hindu nationalism.
Yeah.
And then there's the pogroms against Muslims and other minorities. Like, this needs to be part of the narrative. But to my mind, it's always got a lot more to do with religion. Religion's often used as an excuse.
Yeah.
Because, like, I did travel in India when I was very young, when I was 18. Part of my family are associated with Ireland. Issues that are represented as terrible religious disputes. Usually you find what's behind it is colonisation often, or that people want to make a profit out of it. And so there's one of the issues that I've been told about Kashmir is that India is desperate to lock up its water resources.
Yeah.
And so many of the big rivers come through Kashmir, so they want to be able to control it. They want to be able to control the resources. There's mining going on there, riverbed mining, other issues as well. So incredibly damaging. So it's often presented as a religious argument where you always need to look beyond that.
Yes, definitely, you're right there. And here we have you here, sir. Thank you so much for coming in. So what's your views on the current Kashmir situation at the moment?
Current situation is not just started even like Ms. Lee said, 5th of August 2019. It started since 1947 when India and Pakistan come as an independent nation from the British colony. Because in 1947, India sent the army an excuse that the then Maharaja invited. Just like Afghanistan, Russia came to help Najibullah's rule. So similar way, India sent army. And since then, gradually and systematically, they increased the soldiers, Indian army, occupying army, in the valley. And that slowly continued until today. And the insurgency started after the rigged election in 1987.
Yeah.
The election was in Kashmir conducted by India, so only pro-Indian candidate can contest the election. People who want independent, they are not allowed to contest.
Really? They actually stopped them from...
Yeah, from the beginning. So
really? I didn't know that.
That's how the parties are controlled by India.
Right.
And in 87 election, people, even pro-independent people said, okay, we will contest in this election. And they, that flexibility, they took it, and last time they believed in the democracy. What happened was in 1987 election, it is completely rigged. And the winning parties, which is pro-independent part, they were arrested. And they declared, who lost, they declared as the winner. Since then, the insurgency started. And the gun culture came into the valley. one of the peaceful place on the earth, even before 1987. Since then, insurgency and the Armed Special Force Act that stop any inquiry, give a free hand to the army and security forces to do anything. Anywhere.
Is that the one that gives them immunity, so no Indian soldiers can get charged?
Yeah, they can knock any house anytime.
Yeah.
And they're not legally bound to answer to anything.
And like there's the shocking levels of rape. The children being taken away to Indian prisons.
Rape being used as a tool to oppress, and children being taken, young boys being taken and radicalized, and then the banned pellet gun was used to systematically blind the generation. And even though this all happening, and Australia, as a Western and a champion of the human rights, their knowledge about Kashmir and international politics is very shallow. And where that you come into the picture and educate them in a political realm, talking about more awareness you bringing, and which is great job you have done. Because I've been watching you for many years and been shared many platforms as well. So that was wonderful. And the last issue come the 2019 August 5th. Suddenly they completely locked down and siege internet, telephone, everything stopped. And by the way, I was there just before.
Wow.
I was attending.
You were there on August 5?
Not August 5. I was there in July.
Oh, in July.
Until August 4th.
Really? And you flew out on August 4th?
I flew out because we went for a family wedding, and we were supposed to stay for the Eid, which is August 12th. So after the wedding, we visited other families and friends. Then we can see that more troops are coming in.
And from personal experience, of course.
And my family saying something happened. I think Then we had some insight, and our family, friends, and people said something going to happen. If you want to leave, it's better to leave. Otherwise, you get stuck here. So we saw on the 2nd and 3rd of August. People are rushing to get petrol stations and groceries. So leaked message that the government employees got that they have to store for at least 2-3 months.
Wow.
So we flew out of Kashmir on 4th.
Oh, gee.
Then 5th when we reached India, siege. And since then siege is ongoing, and one of the longest sieges, more than 18 months now. And there is no internet. And when it comes to the Kashmir, most of the Indian politicians, including the left parties as well, they are all on the same page.
Yes.
Because of the nationalism, they stop thinking beyond human rights. So in that way, most of the Indians support India's atrocities.
So you're saying that
because they everything covered, because it became anything about Kashmir is like a Pakistan.
So you're saying here that the Human Rights Act that we have here set in place, we're not advocating it, definitely.
You mean from Australia?
Yeah.
Well, that's very much the case, and you spoke about human rights issues in Australia. And I think it's really interesting to contrast how the Australian government handles India compared to China.
Exactly.
And there's some very clear comparisons here. Like we regularly, as in the Australian government, and I think quite rightly, take up the issue of the Uyghurs and the human rights abuses there. And issues around Hong Kong. When it comes to India, it's silence. Like Mr. Morrison, our Prime Minister, earlier this year, it was over the, it was not a face-to-face, but they still had a meeting with Modi, the Prime Minister of India. Not a word said about human rights abuses. When there's been the terrible Delhi terrible Delhi attacks on Muslim people. Many other minorities have suffered, and this has been a long part of the history under the BJP party, and not a word is being said about that. So I'm not saying that they should break off trade, but I think they need to build a human rights dialogue
I would like to add
into our
on
trade.
that. I would like to add on what you said, because that's very true. we've been in 90s, we've been in Australian political realm was well occupied with the East Timor, remember, and recently about Hong Kong,
Yes.
and against China, and what is happening in the Muslim area in China, and
Where the Uyghurs are.
yeah, we talk about, and Australian politicians, Australian media, newsreader, everybody's aware and against China they talk. We don't see that when it comes to India. Like India systematically having killing Muslims in the name of, just because of their Muslims, number one, in the name of riot or communal violence. And Kashmir, nobody say nothing.
It's all propaganda. It's our people's fault because we on the media, we don't show the truth. We don't tell people what they need to hear because we're living in a country where, you know, God bless, we don't get to see those controversies day to day, but we don't get to
They don't cover it.
We don't get to feel or empathize for
I
those.
have to disagree with that. But our media and our politicians are very vocal against China or East Timor or anywhere else it comes. But when it comes India, they are quiet. So their human rights voice is very selective. That's what I want to say. They know that, but they don't release the information to the public.
Yes.
So because of that, public's knowledge is very shallow.
Yeah.
Oh, yes,
That is
very,
where
very much
we have
so.
to make the gap. We have to bridge the gap. That is where people like Lee, we need more like that to come to the public and educate them.
Yeah, like in Australia here, there's a lot of, you know, Indian, like right now, yesterday there was Diwali and how Australia has celebrated that. And of course, being a multicultural country, you know, we do also promote all that diversity. So Lee, what I have a question for you is that we don't, in Australia, do you feel that we're promoting any Pakistani sort of events and celebrations here? Or is the Indian celebrations more in a priority, I suppose?
Look, I would agree with that.
Yeah.
When I was in the state parliament, in the federal parliament, and you would just see more celebrations. I actually can't remember seeing a Pakistani celebration, which may have occurred, but I'm certainly not aware of it. And that's why I think it's excellent. Senator Marine Faruqi has taken up the issue of Kashmir in the federal parliament.
Definitely.
David Shoebridge, a Greens MP in the state parliament, has taken it up, spoken about the issue, and has moved a motion about the issue. So that issue is before both our federal and our state parliaments. So I think that's an important contribution. But when you look at how we achieve social change, and as I mentioned, I've been involved when I was young, anti-apartheid, Vietnam, but generally progressive change, you need a public voice. You need a strong public voice to put the pressure on the politicians. Of course, I believed it before I went into Parliament, and every day there taught it to me. When you've got a strong public voice for progressive change, the MPs have courage to do the right thing. Yeah. So it's good that we've got a couple of voices speaking up. We want more voices inside Parliament and outside Parliament speaking up. So, yeah, there's a big job to do.
Yes. Well, thank you so much, Ms. Lee, and thank you so much for you both coming onto the show.
Thank you very
now,
much.
we're just going to conclude here, but the one last thing I will definitely say is that do not be afraid to speak up for what is meant to be, for what is right, and for whatever you can make a change towards a society, do it, because it's you that can make that change. Thank you so much.